Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, picture this. Headlines just screaming about a sudden political earthquake in Europe.
Yeah, another one.
Right. A government collapsing less than a year after it even formed.
Barely got going.
Exactly. And it seems like it was all triggered by a standoff over, well, one of the thorniest issues around migration.
Definitely a flashpoint.
Yeah.
And that's what's been happening in the Netherlands this week.
So we're taking a deep dive into this stack of sources you sent over articles, reports, some expert analysis. And our mission, really just for you, is to cut through the noise, get you quickly informed on what went down.
Who the key players are.
Yeah.
Geert Wilders, Prime Minister Dick Schoof.
Right, and understand the context, the potential implications drawing only from the material you shared with us.
Yes, we'll look at the immediate trigger, that specific clash over asylum policy, but we also need to sort of zoom out a bit.
Understand who Geert Wilders actually is.
Exactly. What's his platform about, really? How did this coalition even function, or maybe not function, before this?
Good point. And what do the experts in your sources think might happen next?
It's a really fascinating, if pretty abrupt moment in Dutch politics. Really shows how fragile these coalition governments can be.
And it definitely connects to those broader trends we're seeing elsewhere in Europe, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Migration, political shifts, it's all intertwined.
Okay, let's unpack what your sources lay out, starting with the event itself, the collapse.
So the reports confirm, yeah, the government fell on Tuesday. Prime Minister Dick Schoof resigned.
And the timeline is pretty stark. Formed July 2024, didn't even make it a full year.
No, not at all. And Scoof's reaction, quoted in the sources, was pretty direct.
What did he say?
Called Wilder's decision to pull out irresponsible and unnecessary. Basically said, this shouldn't have happened.
Okay, so that's the what. Now the why. Your sources seem to pinpoint a very specific trigger moment.
They do. It centers on Geert Wilders walking out of a coalition meeting.
Because he was pushing for more asylum measures?
10 additional asylum measures, specifically. That was the crux of it.
And that meeting, I read somewhere it was incredibly short.
Yeah, one source said it reportedly lasted just 1 minute. 1 minute.
Wow. Before Wilders just pulled the plug.
Seems like it. His statement right after on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, was very clear.
What did it say?
No signature for our asylum plans. No changes to the main outline agreement. PVV leaves the coalition. Just like that.
60 seconds to end a government. So what were these 10 extra measures he was demanding?
The sources detail them. Things like a freeze on asylum applications, halting the construction of new reception centers, limiting family reunification.
Okay, and the crucial thing here, emphasized in the material, is that these were extra demands, right?
Yeah.
Beyond what they'd already agreed.
Exactly. Beyond the initial coalition agreement, what they call the main outline agreement. That's key.
Did the sources give any insight into why these points right now?
Well, it's interesting. Several sources note that quite a few of these proposals Wilders brought up, they'd actually been discussed before.
During the original coalition talks?
Yes, last year.
Yeah.
And apparently dismissed, often because of legal concerns.
Ah, so maybe not entirely new sticking points.
Well, his former partners certainly claimed that. They said some demands were similar to things already agreed or weren't actually being blocked by the other parties.
Which suggests, what? That maybe the dispute wasn't purely about the policies themselves.
It suggests the timing and the way it was done might have been, let's say, strategic. Perhaps more about creating a confrontation.
Okay, that's a really important nuance. Let's shift focus then to Geert Wilders himself. He's obviously central here. What background do your sources provide?
Okay, so he's 61 from Venlo. And interestingly, he's the longest-serving lawmaker currently in Dutch politics. Quite a record.
Really? How did his career start?
Back in the 90s, he worked as an assistant for Frits Bolkestein of the VVD party. Then VV city councilor in Utrecht, got elected to parliament for VVD in 98.
So he started within a more established party, the VVD. When did he break away?
He left the VVD in 2004. That's when he started his own group, which eventually became the PVV, the Party for Freedom.
And his core political identity, reading through your sources, seems laser-focused on one main area.
Oh, absolutely. Anti-immigration and anti-Islam policy. The reports consistently say this is at the top of Wilders' agenda.
And the material mentions some specific, pretty controversial points from his 2023 manifesto.
Yes. Things like wanting a ban on all mosques, Islamic schools, even the use of Qurans. Also banning anyone wearing a hijab from government buildings.
Wow. and reducing non-Western immigration, pushing for a general asylum freeze.
That's right. And the sources don't ignore his past rhetoric either. He's known for, quote, hardline anti-immigrant and anti-Islam rhetoric.
There's that detail about the 2016 conviction too, right? For inciting discrimination against Dutch Moroccans over comments from 2014.
Yes, that's mentioned. And another source brings up his 2017 comment, calling some Moroccans in the Netherlands scum.
Just to give some context here, the sources note that as of January 2024, the Netherlands had nearly 3 million residents born abroad.
And specifically, 176,000 born in Morocco, plus another 250,000 residents with at least one parent born there. So a significant community.
Okay, that paints a clearer picture of Wilders. Now, what about the coalition government he just left? Who was actually in it?
Right, there were 4 parties. Wilders' PVV, of course, then the VVD, that's the traditional liberal conservative party.
Right.
Then NSC, New Social Contract, their newer sort of centrist conservative, and the BBB, the Farmer Citizen Movement, which is more rural, agricultural focus.
And together they had the numbers, right, in the 150-seat parliament.
They did, yeah. A comfortable majority on paper. PVV had 37 seats, VVD 24, NSC 20, and BBB 7. That adds up to 88 seats, well over the 76 needed.
So, a solid majority, yet the sources call it an uneasy governing coalition, even a marriage of convenience. Why was that? What were the tensions before this asylum blow-up?
That seems crucial. The material suggests that, despite the seat numbers, this coalition was fragile from the get-go. Took months of tough negotiations after the November 2023 election just to form it.
Different shades of the right wing, but maybe not compatible?
Seems that way. You had Wilders' populism, often controversial, rubbing up against the more traditional conservative VVD and the centrist conservative NSC.
And the sources mention infighting, struggling to get things done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Characterized by internal infighting, struggled to push through policies. So while asylum was the final straw, it sounds like there was already friction. Differing priorities, underlying tensions. The ground was already shaky.
Right. So when Wilders pulled his PVV and their 37 seats out, bang. The others, VVD and SC, BBB, were left with only 51 seats, majority gone instantly.
Just like that.
How did the partners he abandoned react? The sources mentioned shock and anger.
Considerable shock and anger, yes. The general feeling reported was that Wilders had basically engineered the crisis, cooked it up.
And the quotes are pretty strong. VVD leader Dylan Izilgos, she didn't mince words.
No. Called it super irresponsible. Directly accused him of putting his own interests first, saying it wasn't about asylum at all.
She also called for new elections quickly, right? To keep pursuing right-wing policies.
Yes, as soon as possible, she said. And Mona Keizer, the BBB deputy PM, was quoted saying, "I think Wilders is betraying the Netherlands." Pretty blunt.
Very blunt. But how is Wilders himself reacting to all this fallout? Does he seem worried?
Quite the opposite. According to the reports, he appears emboldened.
Emboldened? How so?
Well, he told reporters his intention is clear. He aims to become prime minister, and he wants to ensure that the PVV becomes bigger than ever in the next elections.
For a clear power play, what do the sources say is the likely path forward now? Elections.
Snap elections are widely expected, yes. It's hard to see how a minority government could function effectively.
When? Soon.
Probably not immediately. One Reuters report you provided suggested an election before October is unlikely, and then forming a new government. Well, that could take months again. Remember how long it took last time.
Yeah, ages. So what happens in the meantime? Who's running the shop?
The remaining ministers from VVD, NSC, and BBB will stay on, but only as a caretaker government.
Meaning?
Meaning they handle essential day-to-day stuff, but generally avoid big new policy decisions. The sources also mentioned the upcoming NATO summit in The Hague end of this month. That's likely a factor keeping the caretaker setup in place for now.
Got it. And if Wilders does win big in the next election and wants to be PM?
The challenge remains the same. He still needs to build a majority coalition. Get enough parties on board to control at least 76 seats out of 150.
It really does feel like a huge gamble on his part. Why pull the plug now? Did the sources offer any analysis on the strategy or the risks?
They did offer a few angles. One analysis from Armida van Riege at Chatham House floated a possible reason. Maybe Wilder saw PVV support starting dip in recent polls.
So maybe a move to stop the slide and regain momentum.
That seems to be the logic presented in some sources, yeah. By making the coalition collapse over asylum, he puts his signature issue front and center again, really hammers home his core message for the upcoming election campaign.
Makes sense from his perspective, maybe, but is it seen as a smart gamble overall? Are there big risks?
Oh, definitely. The sources highlight significant risks.
Yeah.
While it might energize his base, the move is widely described in the reports as reckless.
Reckless how?
Well, the perception that he's putting, personal ambition ahead of national stability, that could really hurt him down the line. It might further complicate his ability to form alliances after the next election.
So parties that were already reluctant might be even more wary now.
Exactly. If they see him as someone who will walk away from a deal so quickly, why would they sign up again? The material explicitly says there are no guarantees this will pay off for him, especially since his party was in government handling this portfolio for nearly a year.
That's a really key tension, isn't it? The potential reward versus the risk of becoming even more isolated politically.
Absolutely. And this whole situation in the Netherlands, the volatility, the role of populist parties, migration being such a central divisive issue, it really echoes what we're seeing elsewhere in Europe.
And your sources mentioned that.
Yeah, they noted polls showing Wilder's PCV and the Green Left Alliance are kind of neck and neck. It reflects how migration, cost of living, these issues are really stirring things up across the continent. Germany, France, the EU Parliament elections. Similar dynamics.
A familiar pattern. One last thing, did the sources touch on the immediate economic impact of this government collapse?
Briefly, yes. There was an assessment from Sandra Flippen, chief economist at ABN AMRO Bank.
And her take?
Basically that the immediate economic impact is likely minimal. Her reasoning was that the coalition government was so short-lived, it barely made any concrete plans anyway. So not much policy to suddenly unravel, economically speaking.
Okay, so to recap, a swift, pretty dramatic collapse of a relatively new coalition government in the Netherlands.
Triggered by Geert Wilders pulling out over specific additional demands on migration policy.
Wilders, a long-standing figure defined by his anti-immigration stance, now seems emboldened, aiming for the top job.
But it's plunged Dutch politics into uncertainty. Snap elections are likely, but forming a new government will be tough. And Wilder's gamble might make finding coalition partners even harder for him.
Right. So this deep dive using the specific sources you provided hopefully helps us see beyond just the headlines.
Yeah, to understand the layers, Wilder's background, the coalition's own instability, the strategic calculations possibly behind the timing.
It really underscores how potent these issues like migration are and how quickly political ambition and policy clashes can destabilize things. And as you think about all this, maybe here's a final thought, building on the themes in your sources. In these fractured political times, not just in the Netherlands, but across Europe and elsewhere, how do leaders balance trying to keep a coalition together versus sticking to really hardline policy demands, especially on divisive issues?
It's a huge challenge.
And when voters go to the polls after periods like this, what ultimately persuades them more? Is it the promise of bold, maybe disruptive action on the issues they care about? Or is it the appeal of stability, of just having a government that can function? Something to mull over as we watch what happens next.